societies versus the modern liberal West. I think I'll start with a kind of a general question. I guess, first I'd like to hear from Rahul Sur and Habiba as well, and then, Christina and Professor Sarkar. Do you feel that permissive, say maybe kind of Western model permissive liberal societies, which today are like not just about permissive in terms of sex positive and those kinds of things, but also LGBTQ and everything. Let's kind of bring that into the picture as well. Versus Sharia. Do you feel that women are less exploited in modern liberal permissive societies compared to Sharia, or do you think that on average it's a more complicated picture? You can please use the mic. Just turn that on, Christina, if you could. And whoever wants to take the question first, I don't want to put anybody on the spot. Do you think that women are more exploited under, say, a Sharia kind of regime versus a modern, very permissive liberal society? Or do we have any data on that? I'm thinking of things like, we have things like date rape over here, things like that, which don't really, they don't even really stand up in court. So that's where the question is coming from. Your thoughts? Anybody? Go for it, Christine.
There's a lot that I'm not going to speak to on this. However, one thing that I do think is important is I did spend some time working with sex offenders and trying to treat that train of thought. There is a very distorted thought process in the mind of someone who offends sexually and reoffends sexually. And some of our speakers touched on that very mindset. I believe even earlier we were introduced to the word sociopathic. And I think that is important. When I was teaching people how to not reoffend sexually, we got into what informed consent was and what are limits, who cannot consent to intimate relations. And when working with the juvenile population, there were very specific rules which may or may not vary in between state lines in the United States, but there was no more than 3 years age difference was something to consider. And keep in mind, this is intended for to protect adolescents who may be intimate with each other. So a 16-year-old with a 19-year-old, for instance, or a 14 and a 15-year-old. It was not ever intended to open the age of consent for a 14 or 7-year-old to consent to intimate relations with a grown adult. Other things that we taught the youth offenders and adult offenders in some cases were that someone cannot consent in certain conditions, primarily being under the influence of alcohol or illicit controlled substances. And if someone is not in their right mind because they are in a manic episode or completely psychotic, in some cases suffering from cognitive concerns like dementia, where's the line for consent? And also people have to be able to understand the positive and negative consequences of what they are consenting to. What are the good things that can happen as a result, and what are the potential not good things and negative consequences that can happen as a result of informed consent to intimate relations with another human being. So with that being said, I'd like to pass off the torch because I know that somebody else more clarified some of these topics. So.
Anybody else wants to have a go at the same question? Yeah.
I know it's going to be very controversial, but I don't expect less from you, Carl. So this topic, we can see it from the social and also from the legal point of view. From the legal point of view, a lot of Muslim countries, they don't recognize marital rape. Marital rape is not recognized. But if you look at it in the Western countries that is recognized, and that's because of the Sharia law, basically, which he had pointed out earlier. Also, when we speak about the rape and a lot of other topics which you have pointed, the legality of it, it's different. And also, the freedom that comes with it is different. For example, when you talk about the LGBTQ, we do see it from the human rights perspective, but it's also the freedom that they can do. Can you practice that freedom legally in a Muslim country? So we have to look at it from that point of view, and that's how I compare it, rather than more from the social and other stance. I look at it how they can practice their freedom. In Afghanistan, do we have LGBTQ? Yes, but can they practice it? Are they allowed? Is it legal? No, they will be stoned. They will be killed. So if you look at it from that perspective, I think there's no comparison there.
Yes, I completely agree with Habiba. There is a huge difference between the legal regimes which allow women to operate in freedom in the Western countries and what is permissible in Muslim countries. So therefore it is very, very different. I think we should not fall into the trap of false equivalence.
A point well made. Another dichotomy we touched, Christina, you had a slide on paternalism. So this is not just Christina, it's for anybody. Do we have any data on the relative oppression of women in paternalistic versus matriarchal or those kinds of societies?
I am certain that it is out there. That is not something that I researched because I was trying to stay focused on my topic and provide a general overview. But that is something that I do think is important for further consideration, is to identify the differences between cultures and how they are led.
Okay. Habiba, the situation right now with the Taliban in Afghanistan, when we read literature about the Taliban, we often hear this thing said that this contrast between Islamic law versus Pakhtunwali, or the traditional Pashtun code of honor. So I wanted to understand the Taliban's policies. Is it more, really, truly speaking, is it more in line with Sharia, trying to implement or Islamize Afghan society, or is it really traditional Pashtun culture expressing itself in the garb of Islam?
I'm actually glad you asked that question because I wanted to address that as well. My name is Habiba Ashna Marhoon. I'm from Kunar Ningrar provinces. Pashtun by tribe, and I can give you history of 100 years of my women in my family who are educated. Now, the Taliban have banned education and call it culture. What type of culture is that? Because that's not the Pashtun culture, that's not the Afghan culture that the women in my family were raised in. The Taliban are often labeled as Pashtuns because of the population of Afghanistan, which is the majority are Pashtuns. No matter who comes to power in Afghanistan, because the majority are Pashtuns, they will be Pashtuns whether anybody likes it or not. In the Republic, please take the data, take a look at it. How many Pashtuns were in the government? How many Pashtuns were soldiers? How many fought for that country against the Taliban? You will find more, if not equal, to the Pashtuns who are with the Taliban. Remember, what the Taliban are doing, and I'm going to say this, I don't know if my fellow panelists would agree with me or not. The Taliban, what I call is mullahcracy. It's mullahcracy. It's not Islam. It's not Pashtun culture. It's not Sharia, it's mullahcracy. It's a few mullahs trained in Pakistan, educated in Pakistani madrasas, sent to Afghanistan, put in the mosques and told them to govern. That is mullahcracy. What mullah says in a mosque, that's implemented in that village, in that ministry. That is not religion, that's not culture, that's pure mullahcracy, and they bring in their own reasons, they bring in their own arguments, they bring in their own things. In Kandahar right now, if the Taliban, whom they claim to be, and people actually call them as Pashtuns, if they were the real Pashtuns, in Kandahar, there are thousands and thousands of Pashtuns right now in the prison. Mainly and purely because of their oppositions on social media. Nothing else, only on social media against the Taliban. The Taliban don't have any ethnic group, or they don't have any ethnicity. You go to Mazar, they are Uzbek Taliban. You go to Bamiyan, they are Hazara Taliban. You go to every province have their own Talibans, but because the majority are Pashtuns, they call them the Pashtuns. But it's a pure mullahcracy, if I had to put it.
Got it. Okay. Rahulji, did you want to say something about that at all?
Well, I mean, again,
Should be on it.
the question is that, what were they trained in the madrasas in Pakistan? That's the question, and that is, they formally say they're implementing Islamic thing. So therefore, it is an unpopular thing to say, but we must go to the root causes. For instance, when they talk about, minorities, there is a formal declaration in the Islamic Declaration of Human Rights that the only criteria for human rights is whether it conforms to Sharia, right? And in that, men are superior to women, women are chattel, women cannot have certain rights, they cannot speak. That is what is written in the Quran, right? Now, whether you're going to follow it, whether there will be more progressive cultures, that's a modification of what is written. But what is written in the Quran, which is the undisputed direct word of God from Gabriel, it cannot be questioned. So therefore, when they say you are allowed to have, 4 wives, then no matter how much they try to oppose it, they'll say it is written. And that is why you find Nikahgram in the UK promoting, 4 wives. So one has to go back to the root, right? And this is not hate. I'm just talking about facts. I have a series of articles in which I've analyzed the word Islamophobia, in which I have given a verbal response to Islamophobia, in which I have proposed a new word called Islamofactism, right? That is discussing Islam based upon facts. We are not discussing with hate. We are not discussing with harassment. We are not discussing with, innuendos. We're just discussing based on facts. There cannot be any ideology which is immune to criticism, examination. I do not accept that. And that is what is there in the international law. So therefore, one has to go back to the roots and see what does it say. Now this raises very, very uncomfortable questions for the Islamic world, but I don't think that the questions can be indefinitely postponed.
Thank you. I saw Mahmood shaking his head. So if we have time at the end, I would like you to say something on this.
This is your discussion. I was not agree with some of the.
If we have time at the end, if you'd like to, I'd like it. Not right now.
So the thing is like.
One more second. In that case, just use the
I
mic.
think everybody can hear me. My name is Professor Marhoon. I'm a professor at Kabul University. I basically did like 9 years of madrasa. I'm from Kandahar. So I'm husband of Habiba.
So you were at a madrasa?
Of course I was. So the things like Taliban is implying, it's not the Islam, it's not in Sharia. It's their own version of Islam, a political mindset. The things which was like said like it's in Quran is that there's another different kind of this explanation. We come to these words from a lot of different religions. I was reading one of the constitution part like in Stafford here in Virginia, there is a law, a specific time there is, that is in Constitution, that you can beat your wife. It is an hour, which hour, I don't know, in the morning before you go to church. It is in the Constitution of America. But it is not like the things that you take from the, say that all the Christianity is like this, all the religion. These are the ways that they made it. But what say the Quran, they have their own tafsir. We mean the tafsir mean the explanation. They made their own, they did it the way they want. But it is not in the Quran. They have their own explanation. They make it the way they want, the way they look at that. But for example, there was the explanation like about the LGBTQ. I can tell you, every big mullah or talib have a boyfriend. They are keeping it right now, but it's not legal. They have it with them. They have 4 wives, but they have a boy as well. But it is not like in Sharia, that's not there. So that was why I say, like, in Sharia, in the verse and things, you cannot find those things. Islam is not more equality. It is equity, like a kind of different perspectives of kind of different explanation. So that was why I say that, like, if Quran says that you are qawwamuna ala nisa, it means that you are responsible. For example, I was studying in France, so a lady asked me, how is your culture? I said, the way in our country is this, that the woman is doing whatever decision made in a home, is doing things. So whatever is happening. So that is the woman thing. But man, it is just bringing things from outside. And when a man is responsible to give food, clothes, everything to the woman, just responsibility. Even if a woman is feeding the milk to the child, the man is demanded to give her money, to pay her. So this is in Sharia. But they didn't explain that way. They just took that thing. Women's rights are more than men in Quran. But it's not explained. They just explain the things what they want. They just take like the men crossing. My wife said mulacracy. I would say the men crossing is there. They just make it. And this is all religions things. All religions, the men just occupy it and you abuse it or use it like whatever you want. I know my wife is not agreeing.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to add a little bit of nuance to the conversation. Anyway, this is a question for Professor Chandan Sarkar. So you had statistics over there about percentage of rapes of Muslims versus Hindus. Now, this is a question from somebody anecdotally. Recently, I met some Bangladeshi people in a restaurant in the United States. I asked them their names. They gave Hindu names, but then they said that they're Muslims. Now, this is something you often hear or read about in Bangladesh, is that a lot of the Muslims over there, they're culturally, they look Hindu, they have Hindu names, they speak very Sanskritized language, their women dress like Hindu women. So how much of these statistics are underreported or overreported or a case of mistaken identity?
Thank you very much. Actually, this is not recorded yet. That is how much. But here they say, you are telling this is the happening. They say, I'm telling this is actually maximum 90 to 99% Muslims are doing this policy. That is one word also I like very much, mullacracy, mullah tanto actually in our local language. They insisted this one, that is you just make a fake name, like my name is Chandan. One person name in Bangladesh, Muhammad Sajjad Johid Chandan. Chandan is a Hindu name, Shagor, Hindu name, but his name is Muhammad Shagor Khan. It's a common. So they use this name maximum, maximum 95 to 99% when they make a relationship with a Hindu girl. Hindu girl, they know it. That is the Muslims and a Hindu boy. But if they use this fake name and what you mentioned, the Bindis and Deses, they easily fall in a trouble. Another is the mullacracy. That is mullahs of madrasa. They provided information. You look, this is a powerful Hindu family. If you just fall in love with that girl and fall in a trap that girl, money will provide it to you. You just take money from us and go to the restaurants and do these. There is a policy, there is a system to take our Hindu girls. That is going on. So unless you are asking, it's 95 to 99% cases, this is happening in our countries.
And it's called Al-Taqiyya.
Al-Taqiyya, yes, absolutely right. It's Al-Taqiyya. And then more like
sanctified by religion as
yes, and
telling a
then
lie when you need to. It's called Al-Taqiyya.
go to that direct happen if you just marry or fall in a trouble a Hindu girl, and it is your duty to fix your waist that is having ticket. So this is the goal.
Ever since the student protests, we've had the interim caretaker government of Muhammad Yunus. He is hailed as a liberal here in Western societies, but we've seen a massive spike in violence against religious minorities. Do you think it's just a question of mismanagement, or how do we understand this? I mean, we're told that it's a liberal government, it will bring good change, but we're seeing the exact opposite on the ground.
Yes, it's absolutely, you are right. And I'm working for 2007, and then this movement also, when first day, I'm just involved. When that it was in 18th August. It's a massive procession we did in Dhaka, me, Chinmoy and others. After that we did in a 20th October in Chittagong, it's massive. And 20th in November in a Rangpur. And each and everywhere, actually I just planned, and then my students as university teacher, very high popularity throughout the countries. So what happened, you see, they just, it is our peaceful protest for our own cause, for our own reasons. But they are telling it is a Amalik, that is insist Amalik, and that's why our fellow colleague 49 arrested and in jail, including our Chinmoy false sedition case. Not only that, additional 4 cases, murder cases, and they have a case against me as well. My name is Chandan Sarkar, but luckily I'm saying they use my name is Chandan Roy. That's not in the airport, I'm gonna say, but still, I'm gonna fall into trouble in the airport. My visa was 2023, luckily. That's why I'm here, unless I was in the jail. And this Yunus government, I'm telling, all Yunus that is educated in Pakistani madrasa and our madrasa, and meticulous design is not for that. Meticulous designed by Professor Muhammad Yunus. What actually he used? Meticulous designed by Hizbut Tahrir, Pakistani Jamaat, and do you know Pakistanis people are freely, without even visa free. That is, they can travel in our countries. Several times, Pakistanis ministers, armies, they just frequently visited. They're meeting with this group, and this group, I'm telling Professor Muhammad Yunus, more fanatics than others. They say not, you are telling that he is just supported, it's a more fanatics than some others. Thank you very much.
That's interesting. I'm going to keep my name there. For those wondering, lunch will be at 12:30, so we have 15 more minutes of this. There's one question. Considering that the entire population of Greenland in 2024 was 56,800, the rationale given by Denmark that there was a population explosion that needed to be controlled, it seems kind of fallacious. I mean, I know Denmark is a small country, but given the kind of resources that Greenland has, so any comments on that?
For me, for me to even do what happened to one woman was completely unacceptable. And the fact that it happened for as long as it did is troubling. That's why I think it's important that the Prime Minister formally acknowledged that this was systemic and institutional discrimination against these peoples, and they apologized. So that's where I focus on, because there is a lot of land, a lot of resources, and not as many indigenous people as there were. The population was cut in half between the 60s and 70s, I think. I should have probably worded that a little differently on my presentation. It was between the 60s and 70s that the population started exploding when they became more part of Denmark and they had more access to healthcare and resources. That's when it was like, oh, we have this unintended consequence of this indigenous poor population exploding. Let's do something about it because now they're crippling our welfare system. So in the name of cost savings, that's where that started. And really what it was institutional discrimination. So it's really important precedent for other countries to examine that the Prime Minister was willing to acknowledge this formally. That means that taking the first step, other places can do the same.
Got it. I'm going to combine two questions, and this would be a common question for everybody. So, one of the questions was separation of children from families of indigenous people. It's been a part of ethnic cleansing that's been used not just in Greenland, but in New Zealand, Australia, and here in the United States and Canada. So what is the common strand that runs through all of these? It can't just be the psychopathic impulses of a few individuals. But that's the one-pointed question for Christina, but a broader question for everybody. Slightly lower question, but do you think the fate of native Greenlanders would be better in a country like the United States, if it was a part of a country like the United States, versus an ethno-state like Denmark? The United States today is much different from what it was back when that happened to the Native Americans. Whereas Denmark is still like an ethno-state. Do you think it would be, in a diverse society where diversity is really enshrined in the Constitution, where diversity is part of the local culture, do you think the fate of people like the Greenlanders would be much better taken care of versus being a colony of an ethno-state? And you can generalize this concept to any part of the world, and I would like to hear your thoughts on it.
For me, I don't know if I can answer that question, and I can certainly say that 10 to 15 years ago, I would have answered differently. And as I became more educated and learned more about what's happening globally to women and underrepresented minorities, I don't know if I can say that they would have been treated better in the United States after learning about what happened in Canada to Indigenous people and what happened in the United States to Indigenous people and the poor South, which is primarily overrepresented in the African American community.
But today, the United States of today, or even Canada of today, is far different from what it was when all that happened. So today, if you were to say that if they were to become part of the United States today, what would
I want to be careful with that particular question. Maybe a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago. I don't know if I can say that today, quite frankly, because today I don't feel psychologically safe even talking about these topics. And it's really frightening for me to be here today. It's easy to plan a conference behind the scenes and then be invisible. I don't feel fully confident talking about something that I am not uniquely a part of, so I do the best I can to learn and to unlearn. But for various reasons of what's happening in the state of our world and country today, I don't have a sense of psychological safety talking about this. And so that's why I say my views or the research that I found that are other people's views may not necessarily reflect the views of my employer. And we'll say that.
Yeah, to that point, I have to say
the first part of the question, which was about the Australia, New Zealand, Canada, US.
What is the common strand?
All of these children were taken away from their families and kept somewhere and managed by somebody. Do you see a common strand between them?
I don't know I feel like there's fear and maybe ignorance and just people having a lack of education. And if someone is a majority person and they see that there's competing demands for resources from a person who's not in the majority, I think that is concerning. So I want to defer to some of my other subject matter experts on how to answer that in a more comprehensive way.
Did the church play a role in all this? All of these?
That
Canada, US, Australia, New Zealand?
I do
Greenland,
believe that there
Lutherans.
are several
Was the church the
examples.
spearhead of the process?
I did not research into that. I think that is a good topic to look into for the future. I do know over the course of histories, churches have blood on their hands. And I know from different sects as well. I can speak to that, but it is not something I researched for this particular topic, and I think it would be interesting to look more into.
And to Christina's earlier point, I just want to thank all the speakers who are here, because we've had speakers that we invited who declined because they were, in this current political climate, they were afraid to come out and express their minds, so thank you. Anybody else over here, do you believe that a multi-ethnic polity protects women's rights and the rights of people in general much better than if the polity is dominated by a single ethnostate or a single ethnicity? Rahulji or Habiba. Suppose the Taliban was replaced by a shura of all the ethnicities of Afghanistan. You think it would be better for everybody?
You just want to get me in trouble, don't you? Well, clearly, of course, but I have a completely different view on that. If we look at our history and we look at the geography, I'm not an expert on this part. I have to tell you this, Carl. I'm not an expert on this, but I'm going to share my opinion so you guys can disagree and the experts can take this. Because it's more of anthropological and that part of it than political human rights. So every part of the world has its own native culture with native view of solving the problems. And my idea is that an imposed culture, an imposed religion, an imposed way of life will always blow up back. We have witnessed that in different parts of the world. And currently, we are witnessing that in Afghanistan as well. And why do I say that? Afghanistan was a Buddhist, Hindu, and Zoroastrian country. We were not Muslims. The problem that we are facing right now is specifically because of the conversion that's happened, which is in the, it's contradicting our cultural norms. Afghanistan was a melting pot. You asked me earlier if this was the Pashtun, if Taliban were predominantly Pashtuns, and I said no. And if you go to Mazar, there are Uzbek Taliban. If you go to Bamiyan, there are Hazara Taliban. Afghanistan was a melting pot with different ethnicities, different groups living together. And they all had their own native religion, native culture. They lived in that native land. A religion was brought in that did not agree with those native norms. And for years and years and years, there's blood being shed. This is my opinion. Some might disagree with me, but I believe that if we leave the native part of the world to its own evolution and its own way of life, we would have better results than imposing laws. Thank you.
That's an interesting point.
I agree with this.
Last couple of, yes, you wanted to say something? Yeah.
I mean, again, the hypothetical which you had posed is, how do women fare in multi-ethnic versus what?
Versus a single ethno-state or a single ethnically dominated state.
Well, I mean, if you look at the Muslim world, whereas the Western world, the Muslim world, they're under any metric, right? Women out there are worse off than in the Western countries, whether it is legally, whether it is culturally. Now, this is not to say that women do not get exploited there or they do not face discrimination, but you can have a look at the reports of the International Commission for Human Rights of the US. Have a look at the UN reports on what is the difference out there in terms of the freedom. I mean, the extreme example, of course, is Afghanistan, but the same thing is happening in Pakistan also. If you read The Dawn, which is a Pakistani newspaper, you will find many articulate Pakistani women talking about how they are handicapped by culture, right? It is there in Bangladesh also. Recently, for example, they had forbidden the Bangladeshi women from playing football. So these are the specific legal. Again, we have to think in terms of what is the legal regime, what is the culture regime. Again, recalling the fact that CEDAW gives formal recognition to the idea of culture as a constricting factor. So therefore, the difference and the comparison between them is very mismatched, while at the same time saying that women have a tough time everywhere, and therefore it is not a level playing field. But at the same time, just look at the numbers.
I think we are confusing a little bit. There are Pashtun Muslims, there are, and till recently there were a few Pashtun Sikhs, there were Pashtun Hindus. So ethnicity is different. Pashtun is an ethnicity, religion is different.
Yeah.
So we are kind of confusing the two things.
Fair point, yeah. We will wrap up with, there's two beautiful questions, but I'll just wrap up with one last question, just to end. We have a couple of minutes. Let's reverse the gaze. So far we've been talking about women suffering and why is it that certain groups of men, like for instance the Taliban, or we see this also on the American alt-right, why are they so fixated on controlling women? I mean, Habiba gave an interesting statistic that 90 out of 100 edicts by the Taliban are just focused on women, controlling women. Now again, just going to generalize this question. Why is it that certain groups of people in many societies are so fixated? What is it about marriage? Generally, you would think it's nice to be around women who are kind of, educated, but why is it that that's the reverse in some places? I would like to hear one answer from a man and one from a woman.
God, you are in trouble.
No.
They can also be a neutral perspective. It's not a male perspective.
I'm a bit of a...
Thank you.
If you have a look at the religious texts of all the religions,
Might is not what it's.
So there is a certain patriarchal element in all religions. The only question is the degree of patriarchalism, right? It is there in Hinduism, it is there in Christianity, it is there in Islam. The question is of a degree, right? Now, as the idea of, because earlier the rights and responsibilities and the national functions of men and women were in traditional societies considered very different. Even it is there in Christianity, for instance, woman says when they get married she's supposed to obey her husband, etc., etc. Now, when the idea of equality came, this differentiation of roles between men and women started getting eroded, and consequently there was a tension between them. Now that tension between the patriarchal tendency of religions versus the newer idea of equality, that tension still persists. And it is acute in some countries and more resolved in some other countries. So that is what is happening out there, right? And you see it everywhere.
Thank you very much.
So we have